Welcome, confidential listeners, to another entry from our private archives. This is a space for the unspoken, for the deep, dramatic secrets that carry a heavy emotional weight. Tonight's story was sent to me by Valery, a woman who learned that the heart has a memory that neither time nor betrayal can erase. It is a diary of bloodlines and second chances, titled 21 Years of Silence Broken, The Secret My Dead Husband Never Knew. So close the door, turn down the lights, and listen closely, because the audience for this truth is only you. They say the past is a foreign country, but in Atlanta, the past is just a shadow that follows you under the oak trees. I was sitting on my porch, the humid air of the Georgia evening pressing against my skin like a damp blanket, when my son, Ryan, walked up the steps with a look in his eyes that made my blood turn cold. Ryan is a man now. Strong, focused, a reflection of everything I fought to build alone. But that night, he sounded like a little boy lost in the woods. "Mom, I need to tell you something. I've made a decision. I'm going to find him. I'm going to find Desmond." The name hit me like a physical blow, a ghost rising from the red clay of my memories. Desmond. The man who saw my 19-year-old eyes and promised me the world, only to vanish when life got real. He left me with a growing belly and a heart shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. I had survived. I had married Clarence, a good man, a saint who raised Ryan as his own for 12 years until the Lord called him home. But Clarence was my peace. Desmond was my fire. I told Ryan to be careful. I told him that some stones are better left unturned, fearing that the man who broke me would do the same to him. But a part of me, a dark, hidden corner of my soul, was already screaming. After 21 years, the silence was finally about to end. As Ryan started his search, I found myself wandering through the corridors of my own mind, back to the summer of 2005. I was 19, working at a boutique in Buckhead, selling shoes to people with more money than I'd ever see. The smell of expensive leather and the hum of the air conditioner are still vivid in my mind. That's when he walked in. Desmond. He had a smile that could melt the winter frost and eyes that promised secrets I wasn't ready to keep. I tried to be professional, but he was a predator of hearts. He bought a pair of Italian loafers he didn't need just to stay in my orbit for 10 more minutes. Before he left, he leaned over the counter, the scent of his cologne filling my senses. "You got a boyfriend? Because a woman like you shouldn't be walking these streets alone after 6. We were young, foolish, and moving at the speed of a Georgia thunderstorm. Within 6 months, the stick turned blue. I thought he'd be happy. I thought our love was the foundation of a dynasty. But the moment I told him, the light in his eyes went out. The fire became ice. He didn't want a legacy, he wanted an escape. He disappeared into the Atlanta mist, leaving me with nothing but a mother who refused to let me fall, and a son who would grow up asking why he wasn't enough. For 21 years, I told myself I hated him. I told myself that Clarence had erased him from my system. But as I sat on that porch waiting for Ryan's call, I realized that some roots grow too deep to ever be pulled out. A month passed like a slow-motion fever dream. Ryan was distant, whispering into his phone, keeping secrets that felt like heavy stones in our house. Then came the Sunday that broke the world. I was in the kitchen, the smell of collard greens and slow-roasted chicken filling the air when the doorbell rang. I expected a neighbor or perhaps one of Clarence's old friends. I didn't expect the ghost of my youth to be standing on my welcome mat. Desmond looked different, yet exactly the same. The gray at his temples and the lines around his eyes spoke of a life that had finally caught up with him, but that magnetic gaze, the one that had ruined me at 19, was still there. I felt the air leave the room. 21 years of resentment, of lonely nights and struggles evaporated for a split second, replaced by a terrifying electric recognition. Mom, I know I should have told you, but he wanted to come. He needed to talk to you. My son was standing behind him, looking like a mirror image of the man who had discarded us. I felt a wave of nausea. I was a widow, a respected woman in Atlanta, and here was the man who made me a disgrace in the eyes of my mother all those years ago. Valery, I don't deserve to be on this porch. I know that. I've spent 2 decades running from the face I see in the mirror every morning, the face that looks exactly like the son I abandoned. Please, just give me 10 minutes. Dinner was a trial by fire. My daughters from my marriage to Clarence sat there, eyes wide, looking at this stranger who shared their brother's face. The clinking of silverware against porcelain was the only sound in a room thick with ghosts. Every time Desmond looked at me, I felt the ghost of Clarence standing in the corner of the room, watching over the life he had protected for 12 years. Desmond didn't eat much. He just watched Ryan with a mix of awe and agony. He was seeing the man he didn't help build, the graduation he missed, the first heartbreaks he wasn't there to heal. Finally, he turned to me. I was a coward, Valery, a boy in a man's body. I thought if I ran far enough, the guilt wouldn't find me, but it followed me to every city, into every bed, into every bottle. I'm not here to take Ryan away. I'm here to ask you, how can I even begin to pay the debt I owe you? I felt a flare of anger. You can't pay it, Desmond. You didn't pay for the diapers, you didn't stay up for the fevers, and you weren't there when Clarence died and I had to be both mother and father again. But then, something shifted in the air. Desmond didn't fight back. He didn't make excuses. He just bowed his head and let my fury wash over him. In that silence, I realized the unthinkable. The anger I'd been carrying for 21 years wasn't just hate. It was the scar of a love that had never truly died. I looked at his hands, trembling on the table, and I felt a traitorous warmth in my chest. God help me. After everything he did, I was still looking at him like that girl in the shoe store. The days after that dinner were a blur of hushed conversations and unspoken tension. Desmond started showing up, first for Ryan, then lingering, always asking if he could help with anything. He wasn't the arrogant boy who had walked out. He was a man humbled by life, his eyes carrying the weight of years of regret. I found myself talking to him against my better judgment about Ryan's childhood, about Clarence, about the struggles I had faced. He listened, truly listened, something the younger Desmond never did. He even fixed the leaky faucet in the kitchen, a small gesture that for some reason meant more than any grand apology. He was slowly, painstakingly rebuilding a bridge across the chasm he had created. One evening, after Ryan had gone to bed, Desmond stayed late. The Atlanta night was alive with the sound of crickets, and the streetlights cast long, dancing shadows on the living room walls. He sat across from me, his hands clasped, his gaze steady. "Valery, I know I don't deserve it, but after all these years being here, seeing you, seeing Ryan, I realized something. My biggest regret wasn't just leaving my son, it was leaving you. My breath hitched. I hadn't expected that. I had prepared myself for every apology, every plea for fatherhood, but not for this. I know you had a good life with Clarence. I saw it in your eyes and in the way Ryan talks about him. But that spark we had, Valery, I never found it again. Not in 21 years. Was it just me, or did you ever wonder what if? The question hung in the air, thick and heavy like the Georgia humidity, awakening a sleeping ghost in my heart. Before I could even process Desmond's audacious question, the front door burst open. It was my youngest daughter, Savannah, home early from her shift, her eyes blazing. She had suspected Desmond's lingering presence was more than just about Ryan, and tonight she had clearly reached her breaking point. "What is he still doing here, Mom? Didn't Clarence teach you anything about real men? He's a user, a coward. He left you to raise Ryan alone, and now that you're doing well, he thinks he can just waltz back into our lives and finish what he started?" Desmond flinched, but he didn't argue. He just sat there, taking the verbal blows, his face a mask of shame. I tried to intercede, but Savannah was on fire, her words cutting through the fragile peace we had built. "Mom, don't you dare. Don't you dare disrespect Clarence's memory by even thinking about this man. He was our father, our protector, and this is a viper trying to coil around everything he built for us." Her words hit me harder than any of Desmond's past betrayals. She was right. Clarence was an angel, a pillar of strength, and Desmond was the reckless fire that threatened to burn it all down again. My daughters, my life with Clarence, my respectability in Atlanta, it all stood on one side, and on the other was the dangerous, intoxicating ghost of Desmond's presence, daring me to choose chaos. The silence after Savannah's outburst was deafening, filled only with the sound of my heart tearing itself in two. The fallout from Savannah's outburst left the house colder than a Georgia winter. I spent the next 3 days avoiding everyone, retreating to the small garden Clarence had built for me in the backyard. It was my sanctuary, a place of order and peace. But even there, the weeds of doubt were taking root. I sat on the stone bench, looking at the hydrangeas, wondering if I was truly betraying Clarence's memory. Clarence had given me a house, but Desmond was the one who had occupied the basement of my heart for 21 years, a tenant who refused to be evicted. Desmond found me there. He didn't come inside. He just leaned against the wooden fence, looking at me with a weary sort of grace. "She's right, Valery. Your daughter. She's absolutely right. Clarence was a better man than I'll ever be. He stood where I ran. He loved where I feared. I'm not here to replace a saint. I just want to be the man who makes up for the boy's mistakes." The anger I had been holding on to felt like a heavy coat I was finally ready to take off. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the gray in his beard and the genuine sorrow in his posture. "Why now, Desmond? Why after the world already settled without you?" Because a man can only live without his soul for so long, Valery, and mine has been here in Atlanta, waiting for me to be brave enough to come back for it. I made a choice that night. I didn't choose Desmond over Clarence. I chose the woman I was becoming over the girl who had been broken. I invited Desmond to dinner one last time, but this time I sat Ryan and Savannah down first. "I loved your father, Clarence, with everything I had. He saved us. but Desmond is part of our history, part of Ryan's blood, and part of a story that never got its final chapter. I am going to give him a chance to earn his place, not as your father, but as a man who is trying to be whole again. The dinner was quiet, but the air wasn't filled with the same poison as before. Ryan sat between us, the bridge that finally held the weight of both his parents. Desmond spoke about his years away, the failures that taught him more than success ever could, and his promise to never vanish into the mist again. At one point, our hands brushed near the breadbasket. It was a small, accidental touch, but it sent a shock through me that felt like a lightning strike in the middle of a dry summer. I saw Savannah watching us. She didn't smile, but she didn't leave. She saw what I saw, a man trying to pay a debt that could never be fully cleared, and a mother who was finally allowing herself to breathe after 21 years of holding her breath. The past wasn't gone, but for the first time, it wasn't the only thing in the room. We were starting to write on a clean page, and the ink felt like it was finally beginning to flow. The months that followed were a season of slow restoration. Desmond didn't try to rush back into the center of my world. Instead, he worked his way in from the edges, proving his presence through 1,000 small acts of consistency. He was there for Ryan's promotion, he was there when the car broke down, and he was there on the quiet Tuesday nights when the house felt too large. One evening, we found ourselves back at Piedmont Park, walking the same trails where we had once whispered dreams as teenagers. The Atlanta skyline was glowing against a purple twilight, a city that had grown and changed just as much as we had. Desmond stopped by the lake, the water reflecting the city lights like a million scattered diamonds. Valery, I've spent 21 years living in the shadow of the man I should have been, but standing here with you, seeing the woman you've become despite me, it feels like I've finally come home. I'm not asking for a wedding tomorrow. I'm just asking to be the one who walks beside you for the rest of the way. I looked at him and didn't see the boy who ran. I saw the man who returned. I realized then that my heart wasn't a static thing. It was a garden that could bloom more than once. The debt is paid, Desmond. Let's stop looking at the ledger and start looking at the sky. As he took my hand, the ghost of Clarence didn't feel like a weight anymore. He felt like a blessing that had kept me safe until I was strong enough to love again. It is funny how life works in circles. Ryan's quest to find his father didn't just give him an identity. It gave me back my soul. Our house is no longer a place of quiet mourning for a lost husband or a place of hidden bitterness for a vanished lover. It is a house of truth. Savannah eventually came around, not all at once, but in stages. She saw Desmond's patience, she saw his respect for her father's memory, and she saw the light return to my eyes. Last Sunday, we sat at the table, all of us, and for the first time in 2 decades, there were no empty chairs, no unspoken names. I used to think that a broken glass could never be mended, that the cracks would always show. But now I know that even a shattered life can be reforged into something stronger, something more beautiful, because it survived the fire. I am no longer the girl who was left behind in a shoe store. I am a woman who was loved by a saint and reclaimed by a man who learned the meaning of courage. My son has his father, and I have found the fire I thought had gone out forever. The mist has finally cleared, and for the first time in 21 years, I am exactly where I am supposed to be. And that is where Valery's letter ends. a story of the long road to forgiveness and the bloodlines that eventually find their way back home. It's a powerful lesson, isn't it? That sometimes the greatest act of courage isn't moving on, but being brave enough to look back. If this entry from our private archives touched a nerve, please leave a like on this video and subscribe to our channel. Help us bring more of these unspoken truths out of the shadows. Click the bell icon to ensure you never miss a whisper from the secrets inbox. But now, I want to turn this over to you, my confidential listeners. Would you have the strength to forgive a man who left you alone for 21 years? Or is some damage simply beyond repair? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Because in the end, time doesn't heal all wounds. It only teaches us how to live with the scars. Until next time, stay safe and keep your secrets close. Good night.